This is Sociology of Race and Ethnicity, Section 217, second group discussion video, Group K, and I'm Audra Flum.
I'm Zoha Kabir.
I'm Kaylee Sides.
Emily Stratmon.
And Rachel Steinhoff.
Okay.
So, describe the intersectionality of male and female immigrants. What are the expectations of each? How have they been treated differently over time?
I found that, I was looking at an outside source and I found that unauthorized immigrant men have very high rates of labor force participation. However, undocumented working age women are actually less likely to be in the labor force than a U.S. native or legal immigrants because the greater proportion of them have children. So the men are more likely to go out and find jobs and start working, whereas the women need to stay home and take care of their children. And then it even said that Mexican men aged 15 to 50 years old. Oh, just kidding. That's the wrong thing. Never mind.
Well, I think you find the boys when they're really young, they start to work as soon as they can to help support the family because one, you don't have the mom working, and so she's taking care of the children in the house. She's doing all the household work and feeding them and probably buying the groceries and everything, while dad's going out and working and getting all the money and
So
even
if immigrant women are working, it's household jobs.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's cleaning hotels, cleaning houses.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we see that portrayed a lot in the media too, especially for Mexican immigrants, the men go work construction and blue collar jobs illegally, and the women stay at home and take care of the kids, or clean neighbors or other people's households who know they're illegal but don't say anything about it since they can't get legal work. So it's kind of that gray area of not really having anything to do but having to find something to do.
And I feel even I read the article about the family that got separated in Ohio, and I feel I think it said that the father had been deported years earlier, and so then the mom and the older sister were forced to work, and so I think that shows even when when men couldn't work, women had to step up and go be the workers of the family. Yeah.
I also feel it's a lot more common for men and husbands and fathers, especially coming from Central and South America, that they immigrate first and they find a job, they make money, they live with other people who have immigrated. They send money back to their family to get the whole family over because generally they can't afford to bring their whole entire family over at once. So usually it's the father who comes over and starts to work first to send money back to eventually get the wife and kids.
Right.
I feel you see that a lot, and I knew someone who did that. He was in the country, but his family, he was sending money back to his family to pay for them to come over. So I feel that happens a lot more often too.
Right, and there's a term for it, but not even just those from Central and South America. It's even those over in other parts of Asia and the Philippines and things like that. Personally, I know our nail tech back home, he came to the country and is working, and he would send money back home to his parents, and he had been for years, and they just finally had enough money to apply for their visas and things like that. So I know it's I don't remember the word. There's an actual term for it though.
I even found when we were going back to the people from that were coming from Mexico primarily, Mexican men aged 15 to 50 years old accounted for 3/4 of all apprehensions at the U.S.-Mexico border, and Mexican women aged 15 to 50 only accounted for additional 1/7 of the apprehensions. So it shows that a lot more men are coming over to get started working and start providing money for their families that they can begin to send back home.
Well, it's if a female like a woman goes over it, she's probably not gonna have as much as an income as the
A man
male.
can doing physical
Yes,
labor.
exactly. They'll get more for being able to do all that physical labor. While female wouldn't make as much, and it wouldn't like give as much as an opportunity to get more family.
Yeah. As for like how they're treated differently, I would say that most of the time, like when it comes to male immigrants, they're seen as like aggressors and like predatory. But like immigrant women are often like sexualized by like
Yeah.
people, especially like I know like there was like the whole like time where there was like it was like yellow fever where like I can't remember like what time period, but like a lot of people, especially from like the military, were like shopping for like Asian women to marry.
Yeah, during the Vietnam War. I
Yeah.
think.
Well, if you look like a lot of TV shows, the like immigrant like women that come over, they're usually with like abusive men and very like
Yeah.
Like the mail order bride.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like women who migrate alone tend to migrate in a relationship. Like men will start relationships online with women and then pay for them to come over and marry them so they can stay legally.
Yeah. So it's like there's a big sexualization of like immigrant women because like oh they can't live by themselves, like they need to have like a partner to support them. And then like when it comes to men, it's like oh they're like raping our women.
Yeah,
and,
like,
they're like
they're bad.
yeah,
Get
like
them
they're all
out.
gang members.
Yeah, they're just gonna like hurt our children and
other things, like violence and
Yeah, like they're
drugs and
seen as
things like that,
aggressors
yeah.
to like their own people and also like the like host countries. you know?
Right. And I feel like that kind of shows that, I mean, it asks how they've been treated differently over time, but I feel like more or less they've kind of been a little bit the same.
I feel like it's a lot the same just with sexism in our country in general. Like even if we're not even talking about immigrant women, like women are just seen as submissive and men are seen as aggressors, and I feel like it's just like tenfold when you talk about immigrants. Like immigrant men are like tenfold the aggressors of a white man, and immigrant women are tenfold the like submissive, sexualized beings that a white woman or an American woman is. So I feel like it's just like our like sexism like exacerbated.
well, and then like they're associated as well with just drugs because like they're like oh they're coming over they're just bringing all these drugs in and you're like
Even like if it's and that's like primarily for like Latino immigrants, but even like Asian immigrants, it's like especially like even like South Asian, it's like oh like all they do is like beat their women.
yeah.
So and I think it just kind of furthers like alienization where it's like oh they're not like our society.
Yeah.
do we want to move to the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next question is
Oh, sorry.
that's okay.
Why do immigrant communities actually have lower crime rates? What are some causes not mentioned in the readings that you think have an impact on this?
I feel like one of the things that I read was that immigrant communities tend to have lower crime rates because they live in inclusive neighborhoods with a lot of support. So when they tend to stay in their own communities versus like kind of integrating into Americanized communities, they have a lot more support. So if someone is unemployed at the time, you have like neighbors and friends to lean on to help. Whereas if they're in like a white neighborhood or a very Americanized neighborhood, you're not going to have that community support. Also, you're a lot more likely probably to get like told on to the government.
Yeah.
So I feel like when you stay in your own community, they are supported a lot more. And if you have social support, you're a lot less likely to go out and do illegal things like stealing to provide for your family, selling drugs to provide for your family, etc. Because people do that when they have nothing else to turn to, and social support is a big thing to like prevent that.
I think too, like being within like a community of people that you kind of can relate to, like gives a little bit more of a positive impact on those people because they're going through the same thing and can relate, and like you said, can like lean on each other. But then I think too, because they're with people that are, like them, they've gone through the same things, they're not gonna, like you said, they're not gonna be as like necessarily picky on like turning people in for certain things, or like I feel like there's less opportunities for like arguments and disagreements within like their own community because there isn't like the huge difference of being an immigrant or being like a U.S. citizen or kind of things in that area, I guess.
Yeah. It also depends on like where they're immigrating from.
Yeah.
And like, cause like immigration now, it's not like there's not as much of like an economic limit. Like a lot of people are immigrating with like an education and are getting like higher level jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So like they already live in like suburban communities. Like why would they turn to crime?
Yeah.
Like they have the means.
And also too, I think it's like just I didn't find it anywhere, and I don't think you found it anywhere. But like they immigrated for a reason. They want to be here, so I feel like they're not gonna do something, or they're not gonna like go out and attempt to do something that is gonna cause them trouble in the long run. Because if they're like even if they're undocumented, or if they are documented, they're still gonna have like more like possible complications with like legal assistance and things like that, especially if you're undocumented, because like they have, I guess, less opportunities, and like if they're undocumented, they're not gonna go straight to a legal professional and say, "Hi, I'm undocumented and I'm here," because like otherwise they're gonna
send
get
them away, deport them.
yeah. So I think they're just careful with the things that they do to like make sure that they're not going to cause problems that could get them sent back to where they came from, because they really wanted to be here and they went through the trouble of coming here.
I said it was like for two reasons. One of that being they kind of like they have to walk on eggshells while they're here. Like they have to be very careful, knowing that the U.S. is extremely racist and will like it. You know, they're very easily their journey in America can very easily end in deportation.
Yes.
And I think they want to be very careful, and so they're not going to go commit a bunch of crimes that will put them in the legal spotlight. And then I also, the second reason, which in the article that she posted, I think I looked more into the I don't know how to say his name, Joseph or whatever. He mentions that there's less crimes in neighborhoods that have more immigrants. And if more immigrants are living together, kind of like we said, there is less conflict between them because there's not as much like tension between American groups and immigrant groups. And they primarily work together to try and succeed, and kind of like we said, they help each other.
Yeah, I looked towards like an outside source, and I found this article, and it talks about like how a lot of them like won't commit crimes because they have like their family with them and like that community, and they didn't want like to support like the stereotypes that people had for them. Like they don't want people to believe that, because that's not how most people most of them are. There's just like there's so many movies and TVs that like change it and make people believe that they're all drug lords and they're all like abusive and lazy. They want to be able to change like the people's perspective of them, so they can actually see them like they're who they really are.
I feel like we can all agree that like the biggest one not mentioned in our readings is just like if you're gonna take the time and effort and how it can be so unsafe to come over here and get your family over here, you're not gonna go shoplift or commit like a petty offense that could get you sent back and therefore lead to your family and or your whole community as well if they're starting to look into you for crimes. So I just feel like, as someone who does have citizenship, like little petty offenses like drinking underage, drinking while driving, like petty theft, like, we get misdemeanors, we get fined, and it's like not that big of a deal where...
Both library and the Adele Hall Learning Commons are now closed to the general public. Students, faculty, and staff from the UNL and other Nebraska academic institutions may remain in the building until it closes at 1 a.m. Please have your IN card or other academic ID out for the community service officers and stuff.
But yeah, I just feel like that at the end of the day, like, we have that like cushion that we know we can do like some like stupid stuff and really not face big consequences for it, where like little stupid things that like we as Americans can do is like could be the end of the life as they know it for them.
And sorry.
No, you can
I was gonna say, like, one of my coworkers, he was an immigrant, and so he talked a lot about like how he had to be very careful about what he did, and like even like things like speeding or like just the little things that we don't really think about. We're like, it doesn't really matter. They will get you for it, and so he was like, even with his like stuff with his, I think he had not his kids, his
His cousins, nephews,
No,
siblings?
His kids.
Grandkids?
whatever, his I'll just call him his kids. Like he had to be careful, like even what they did, and to make sure that they like weren't getting in trouble at school and like stuff. Like they really needed to be aware of every little thing that they could get caught for. So
Alright, do we want to move to the next question?
Yes.
Okay.
Last one. Is building a wall truly the most effective way to stave off immigration? Why not? Give examples of other ways immigrants enter the U.S. I feel like a resounding no from this room. Probably
Yeah.
the wall is not
For
the
sure.
most effective way to stave off immigration. I don't think it would really make any impact at all, honestly, because I just
You can go around the wall for one.
Well, it says, okay, so in the Wayne A. Cornelius article, it literally states that as many as 92 to 97% of people that are apprehended keep trying until they succeed. Like,
They're not gonna stop.
no, they're not
They
going
want
to
to get out of
stop.
the bad situation they're in.
Yeah,
so
like
they'll
they're
do
not
anything
just
possible.
immigrating here for no reason.
Well, you see
They're
that when they go
escaping
into
from
the
it.
desert.
Yeah,
in
like in
Arizona,
that video
they're
we
risking
watched,
their
like-
lives.
Yeah.
Like how I don't remember the name, but didn't he try like more than once and then they finally
Yeah, he said like
made
he
it
tried
through?
like 3 times
Yeah.
and finally got
Yeah,
And
through.
I honestly think that building a wall is just going to make it so much more dangerous because they're going to find so many other ways.
Exactly.
In one of the articles I read, it says that they could fly to Canada and have someone smuggle them over the
Exactly.
north border.
You can-
Like, there's so
Right,
many
so many
other
different
ways.
I mean,
Or, you know, have, like
a
boat them
boat
around.
is they're not
Yeah.
necessarily like patrolling the coast.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
They're
They're just-
focused on like just like that.
The
The
border.
south-
But even if
border.
you think of like the Mexican border, you know, you think of like Texas and where there's actually like border patrol and stuff like that. But one of the biggest ways people migrate by foot over the Mexican American border is through Arizona, where there's desert because they don't have border patrol there because they think that the terrain is so bad that no one's gonna try, which is why dead bodies are constantly found in that desert. I just read a book on that specific topic in my English class, but like that is the main way people actually cross by foot. They're not crossing by foot like in Texas necessarily. Anyways, so I just feel like a wall across the whole border, and when we talk about in politics or you hear it from the Trump
Right.
administration, you're always talking about like Texas. I feel like that's like the
Yeah,
main
it seems
focus
like
of
that's not
anything.
where they're going.
And that's not where people cross by foot anyways, and in general, crossing by foot is not the main way
Also,
people
like-
immigrate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Latinos and Mexican Americans aren't the only immigrants.
No.
Right.
There's
There's
like your Syrian.
Like,
you know,
Also, like you
everybody.
have like illegal immigrants coming from Europe as well. So like,
Yeah.
what's the
it's
Yeah.
coming
solution
from
for that?
everywhere.
I mean, yeah, because they're coming with like vacations, education,
Refugees too.
Like,
yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
they're probably like I don't remember where it came up, but it was like talked about like Dr. Tyler talked about how like I just said they were coming like visit family, education, jobs or whatever, and they're literally just overstaying
Staying
their
their
visa.
visa.
Like
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah.
like entering illegally; they just like overstayed. You know, like
Mhm.
they had a visa to be here for a bit, whether it was like temporary visa, work visa, like student visa, whatever.
There's
They're
like
just,
there's so many like there's hundreds of different visas that you can
Right.
get to just come here and then you can just stay and
Yeah,
nobody
so
would ever
that's
know.
like I feel like that's maybe where a lot of undocumented immigrants come from. Is
Yeah.
they're just like they just don't
Well,
renew their visa.
I was reading an article and it says between 25 and 40% are thought to be visa overstayers, while the
Yeah.
rest entered without inspection. And I think another big way that they're all getting in is through the coyotes, like the but like the people smugglers.
Mhm.
And so it's like I think even with building a wall, that's not going to change. Like they're going to still
Yeah,
have
They're
people
gonna-
just
Yeah.
they're
so
just
many
gonna
different ways to solve
yeah,
it.
it's a huge money business. Like they talked about that with even more people as the ways to get across get even more dangerous. They start increasing their prices, which just grows the
Like,
business,
Yeah,
which makes it even more unsafe there.
Yeah.
It's just a whole.
It's just like putting people's lives at risk. Like I know like there was like instances with like the refugee crisis I think in Europe where it's like they were restricting it, but like obviously these people are at risk because they're gonna try to come anyways. So they were coming like through smugglers on like these boats, and the boats would capsize and everyone would drown.
Yeah.
Well then like they doing like those shipping like Tank
The
things on like the
shipping
boats or like
containers?
trains. Like
Yeah.
I've heard about like them smuggling like people through that way.
I don't remember where it was. It was like, I think it was like a high school Spanish class, and we watched, like, we had like a unit on the drug cartel, but also within that, like, as they're like bringing drugs across the border, like there are people literally hiding in like wagons, like under blankets and under things like that. I remember specifically like watching videos. I don't remember what it's called. I don't remember what class it was, but I'm pretty sure it was like Spanish 2. Couldn't tell you, but I know like there are still drugs are still being smuggled across the border, so then people are also taking a field trip.
Right? It's just,
Yeah.
there's so many different ways to get across.
Also,
Yeah.
like drugs don't just come from like immigrant communities.
Right.
Like,
No.
a lot of wealthy people. Like,
Yeah.
doing it.
smuggle-
Yeah, a
yeah.
lot
So
of
it's
wealthy
not-
people. They just
Yeah.
get away with it too.
Yeah, that's the thing is they can post as much as they want on their
They don't
social
do
media
anything.
and they're
Yeah.
not gonna get in trouble.
But yeah, I just feel like going back to like, is the wall truly the most effective way to stave off immigration? I feel like the talk about a wall just stereotypes immigration more because the only place you could build a wall would be Canada, which we're obviously not going to do on our Canadian border, and Mexico. But like, we are not the only 3 countries on this planet. Like, so talking about building a wall on our southern border is literally just like stereotyping immigration to Mexican and Latino people when that's just not the case, and it doesn't really make sense because stave off immigration, okay, for one group of people out of hundreds, like it's not going to stave off anything, and that one group is going to find other ways anyway. So
Or they're gonna go elsewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Find
Not
a
To just
different
make the
way.
immigration process easier.
Like literally, you have to
I
build a
think-
wall around the
yeah.
whole country so no one.
yeah, so no one can come over. And
Well,
I
and
mean-
someone even said this in class, like instead of kicking them out, like let's make it easier for pushing them towards the process of, and I know know for it's not an
Really,
easy process and it's not, so like let's instead try to work on making it more affordable, making it like
More
a quicker
acceptable.
process,
Yeah.
a
Like,
quicker
make it-
process for people, and even like I don't really know like how realistic this is, but working to make like to help fix Mexico so like it isn't as unsafe of a
Yeah.
country, so that people like if we have such a problem with them coming here, like let's try to help
Go
them
help
out.
them, right?
to
that's
fix
we're
that.
so quick to deploy our troops and militarize in the Middle East.
Why?
But like if we're so quick to do that, like why I don't want to say go to war, but like
They've
Put
got
more-
like
put more
gangs
funds,
controlling communities.
put more and just like put
There
more.
needs to be like reparations. Like,
Send more aid to.
yeah,
Yes.
because I feel like the U.S. like loves to forget its history, and like a lot of the destabilization in like Latin America, even like obviously the Middle East is a lot of like it comes from the U.S., but also Latin America, because like we like to meddle. Like anytime like there's any sort of threat to like democracy, like we go in and kill their leaders and destabilize the country.
And therefore
They would just kind of leave it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you go
and then they start to
fix
come into
it.
our country because their country's in shambles, and we get
Yeah.
confused as
Yeah.
to why that's happening, and it's just this like endless cycle.
Yeah, basically.
But all right, how does early legislation and white indentured servants / black slave relations affect historical and modern discrimination against immigrants? Well, the first act we decided to talk about was the Mexican Repatriation Act it was in the 1930s around the Great Depression.
Yeah, and it's basically we talked about it in class, and it was when they were all repatriated and sent back to Mexico because like the American people were scared they were taking all their jobs. And we talked about in class how like a lot of the people who were deported were technically American citizens because they were Mexican Americans and they'd lived in America their whole life.
Yeah.
It said that an estimated 60% of the 400,000 to 2 million that were sent back to Mexico were like birthright citizens of the United States, and they were just like picked up and kicked out.
And then,
And then it like after they said like they invited them back to work jobs for the United States, but then people got like all fearful again, like oh they're gonna take all our jobs and we're not gonna have any be able to have any jobs and make any money and support our own families.
yeah,
Same thing.
and it like goes to show how like a lot of the times like immigration in the U.S. it's mostly for like the benefit of like people here in the United States
It's
rather
not
than
about
like,
helping other
improving-
people.
No, it's about helping ourselves.
Yeah, and it goes into like white nationalization, like how it says in the book. I'm gonna say on page 368. How like it talks about how the U.S. has always reserved naturalization for whites, and like how like the true definition of like American, I feel like, in like maybe the government's eyes and most Americans' eyes is still like the hegemonic like white
Male.
straight person.
Yeah.
I think, in addition to like they're concerned about like immigrants taking jobs that are like taking their jobs, I think too they're also concerned about immigrants like being able to use like welfare programs that were part of the New Deal. And I know Dr. Talia touched on that the purpose of the act was to exclude Mexican-born workers from New Deal welfare programs, just so they're not like gaining the benefits that like citizens of the United States are able to have.
Yeah, and the reason it was such a big issue at this time was because of the Great Depression. So that's when finally like the fear taxes, the fear mongering, like they're taking our jobs,
No
they're
money.
using our resources, like the government's giving them like money and helping them when it could be helping us, and like et cetera, et cetera.
And this was like the first kind of big movement to deport people out of the U.S., which I think has had a huge impact, especially, I mean, we see it today, and like even in the early 2000s, a lot of the big, pushes by the government and politics to,
It's very like deportation.
Well, like you have
Yeah.
like the whole ICE, like
Yeah,
it's
like,
very
go
much
look
it's very
for
fear
everything.
based.
and
Yeah.
it just shows that like it's even 80, 90 years later, like we're still dealing with this situation, and it hasn't really changed
No,
very
not
much.
at all.
So
I found a
Look at their
statistic that said on an average day more than 50,000 immigrants were in ICE custody in 2019. So like we're just still mass deporting people, especially people to Central and South America constantly.
They're just getting like they're literally getting shoved and crammed onto planes and trains and boats, and they're like being separated from their families and like possible economic opportunities as well. So
And I thought it was really interesting everything that we talked about in class today, like just all the statistics, because that's all you hear is like, oh, they're taking our jobs, they're taking our money, like they're taking all this stuff, but in reality, they're not. Like I thought it was super interesting to learn like they aren't bringing crime here. They're actually like there's lower rates of crime and where like most immigrants are living. They're not taking our jobs, they're taking the jobs that we don't want.
to.
So
And the government's not even
Yeah.
giving them the money and the welfare and the support they do give to American citizens and
yeah.
and
whatnot.
it's not even that they're like not necessarily qualified to do them either. Like many of them are skilled, as like it was explained in class today, and like it's I don't know, they just don't want other people taking the jobs, but I mean
They're not gonna take
It's
it
based
themselves.
on
It's like-
racial discrimination. Like that's like what it comes down to, because
It's
we're complaining about Mexican immigrants, but like where is the complaining about European immigrants and like people
I mean,
that like
that was mentioned today too. I don't remember who said it, but I kind of like was it you?
She said.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, it was you who was like explaining that they're not acknowledging European immigrants, and it, like you said, it kind of shows that we're always emphasizing immigrants of like race and color and not
Yeah.
like
And how we always like downplay like what they do. Like yeah, how you're saying like
right.
a lot of them like are skilled people and they're working these like jobs because like it's their only option.
Mhm.
Like I was talking to my friend about like we were talking about like the death of an immigrant basically. How like a lot of times like you have people who have like really good education in their home countries, but they can't use it when they come here because of the way like our system works. So like her dad is like he had like a really good investigative job when he was living in Sudan, but now he works like I don't know what he does exactly, but he doesn't use like all his education. Like he could have been I think he had like a degree in law, but he definitely makes a lot less now because he can't use it here.
Yeah, and as we kind of touched on earlier about how they're not actually doing the harm we think they are, we did talk about in class how because they're willing to do jobs that we're not doing, we can pay them lower wages and our economy actually flourishes because of it. So realistically, we're buying goods. Realistically, like the goods that we're buying or like the food, like the agriculture we talked about, we're probably getting it at lower prices than we would if we didn't have them working in those jobs and producing the goods that they produce.
Which I think brings up two kind of conflicting points because it's like people want them gone, but then if they are gonna stay, like shouldn't we at least be paying them more? And it's
Yeah.
Well, then like I know she talked about like how if we would like help them, like the illegal immigrants, like get citizenship, and it wouldn't make it so hard. Like our taxes would be like so much better, like for it. Like it wouldn't be as bad as it is if we help them become citizens. But we're
I feel like I'm not entirely sure like how it like works or like the numbers or anything, but I feel like our economy is better than like a decent amount of economies that these immigrants are coming from. So I feel like we do have the funds to pay them like they should be paid. It's just like the government doesn't want to waste their money on someone that's not from here.
Yeah,
That's the
Also,
problem.
a lot of
and
the money
business-
goes to the military.
Yeah.
Well, and businesses can get away with paying people under minimum wage when someone's illegal because who are they gonna go tell?
Yeah.
Are they gonna go to the government and say that this company's breaking a business law and paying less than minimum wage because they can't do that either?
Yeah.
So
Like they're less likely to report anything, especially if they're undocumented.
because they're afraid that ICE will find out and get them.
a lot of things slip through the cracks, and I feel like businesses run in a more corrupt manner as well.
Yeah, they take advantage of that.
They do.
Well, and it's interesting, like, if we weren't spending so much money on ICE and, like, border control and everything going on, like, that would increase the amount of workers we have, which would increase our economy, basically. So, one, we'd be saving money, like, not so much government spending focused on ICE and border control and everything.
Yeah.
But,
No, we don't want that in our country, apparently.
So the second act that we're going to talk about is the 1790 Naturalization Act.
This basically limited naturalization to immigrants who were free white people, so it excluded Native Americans, indentured servants, slaves, free blacks, and later on Asians.
And yeah, the pretty much only stipulation to that would make it hard for a free white person to become a citizen that had to be in the U.S. for 2 years. But that's not really much of a stipulation if you can compare that to the stipulations for immigration today and citizenship
And
today.
again, that's like reflected in our modern day like take on immigration. Like we only think about immigrants as like people who aren't white
Yeah.
because like it's always been the narrative of our country.
If you're white, you're
like fine.
You'll be fine. In
Like,
this
you'll be
country. If you're not,
naturalized.
you're gonna be like there's gonna be fear and stereotypes.
Yeah. And then the other act we were gonna do was restrictions of blacks in 1803.
I think with that act there was I don't remember if it was this act or something else, but there was like a tax on something like if you wanted to maybe it wasn't that one, maybe it was something else, I don't remember.
Well, this was when some, like, a certain amount of states banned the migration of free blacks, and it kind of came from, it said that white plantation owners were especially afraid of blacks from Haiti because there was a slave revolt in 1791. So there was a lot of restriction on where they could kind of move around in the United States.
Yeah. And it's like migration, but again, it's like our immigration, just view of immigration is so like racialized that it's like pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, because during the time of this act in 1803, we were kind of at a turning point with slavery because I think this ban was kind of because they wanted less black people coming into the country because 5 years later, Congress outlawed the international slave trade. It did continue to happen for another like 40 plus years, but we were kind of at a turning point where we were trying to like kind of slow down the immigration of black people into the United States.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the other reasons why this ban was probably put in place.
Well, even after like when this like act was like dispelled and everything, there was still like segregation and everywhere like throughout the history, and literally it was till like what the late 90s, 80s, we were still having segregation. Like it took so many different like people to stand up and everything to try and get it to like be not segregated.
I feel like, I know this is kind of like a stretch, but seeing it in modern times, like when I think about it, I think about like it kind of reminds me of the travel bans that have been going on, like I think it was 7 countries in the Middle East
Yeah.
that aren't I don't know a lot about it, but like weren't able to come over to the U.S. and so it was kind of like how they were trying to slow down the process of blacks coming to America. It's doing the same thing, and that was all
And it's like
With the different group of
fear-based
This
from
one,
the
like back then, it was like oh, vote
2000s.
or like
It's
Yeah,
always
this
just
one.
surrounded by fear. It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
like, people's fear. That's literally just the drive of like almost all.
yeah.
Yeah, and to tie this act and the 1790 Naturalization Act into the second part of the first question that is talking about white indentured servants and black slave relations, like this, the ban on black people in 1803 is about slave relations, but also the Naturalization Act of 1790, it was any free white person, but that also left out all of the indentured servants that were white Europeans. So I think both of these acts tie in a lot to that second part of the question.
We can kind of go into that now before we go into our last act, just because it kind of goes together. I think it kind of, again, it's like the racialization thing. I feel like I bring it up a lot, but it's like most white indentured servants were from areas of Europe that weren't truly considered white anyways.
Yeah.
So like it makes sense that they were still discriminated against,
Like
and how like
Italians.
yeah,
dark
and
complexions.
Eastern Europeans, and how like they actually had pretty decent relations with black slaves because of the stuff they went through. But then how like as like time went on, it became more racialized, and like the government and like the media would kind of portray like give like white indentured servants more benefits to kind of create like this false like kind of this illusion of just like oh superiority, and then it became like white against black after that.
Yeah, pretty much like put that split between like black slaves and indentured
Yeah.
slaves. Once they start getting benefits, like oh, so we are better than you, and it gave them that like
And
mindset.
it's like how like we talk about race as a construct, and it really is because it's to maintain power for like the dominant group, and it's always been that way.
I think to sorry to like budge in, but like when you were talking about how like it's kind of like the white indentured servants seem to have a little bit more of a benefit, I think to like as we mentioned earlier, we kind of see that with like I don't know different forms of immigration because they look a little bit more like us, and I think that's why they are given more of the benefit. Just like as we talked about earlier, like we don't really notice the immigrants coming from like Europe or other countries of that nature, and we're just seeing the ones that have a different skin tone and like things like that. So I think those kind of
And when you talk about like ICE, like we only ever hear about them going to predominantly like Mexican neighborhoods. Like
I don't
you
think
never hear
there's
about
ice for Europe. So
I don't think ICE like goes to like New York and is like oh this is the Eastern European neighborhood. Let's just like go
Yeah,
there.
like
Basically
Russian
focus on,
and like Italian,
Or-
Irish.
Or even like California has a heavy like Asian population, and Hawaii is a very big Asian population. Like there isn't anybody patrolling over there for them. Like they're free. Like they're coming in.
They're
Like
looking at predominantly Mexican,
Yeah.
Latino American places.
Because they're seen as a threat.
Yeah. Okay, so then the last act we're going to talk about is the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act.
So like for that one, they were basically just taking Chinese migrants and expelling them out of neighborhoods and moving them, and there was a bunch of like just like mobs and everything like driving them out, and it was like putting them in danger. and how like they pretty much stopped them from like owning land and everything.
Like it limited like their opportunity for labor, kind of.
After they had used up all the labor, they
Yeah,
wanted.
it, like it like limited like the labor for 10 years and then excluded them and like in the U.S. from becoming citizens, and I think that's part because like I don't know if it's like an app today, and I don't remember where I read it, but it was something like you have to own land or like a property of some sort to become a U.S. citizen, and if they like can't work, like how are they gonna have money to own the land, or like how are they supposed to like labor their land if they're not allowed to do that? So,
I think also this act, I mean, like we said, it really was just for America's benefit because we brought all of these Chinese, Asian people over to help
Men specifically.
our infrastructure, and then as soon as we were done, it was we didn't want them anymore, and it was working on sending them back or
And,
limiting the migration.
Keeping American jobs, and I feel like it's always fear based, and it kind of like how we're talking about like the model minority myth in class, where there's certain stereotypes for each like minority. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because you're being otherized, and if they want to like kick you out, like they did with the Chinese Americans, like they're gonna do it.
Yeah, and like another thing with that, like you mentioned, like we brought them in to work on the Transcontinental Railroad because we needed cheap labor, and that was who was willing to give cheap labor. Because again, it's like Mexican immigrants now, the fear that like they take our jobs, but really they do the stuff that we don't want to do, which is exactly what they did when they were building the Transcontinental Railroad. And then I feel like this act was like meant to not look like such a bad thing, so it's supposed to just initially last for like 10 years. Like it's just because like we can't, like our economy can't like withstand like the immigration right now. So just for 10 years, and then 10 years later they pushed it back another 10 years, and then 10 years after that they made it permanent.
It started in like 1882, and it didn't get like repealed until they became an ally in World War II.
Yeah.
And even then, like there was still like a quota on like how many people could enter, because it was mentioned in class or in the PowerPoint that like a quota was set for like 105 like entrants from China each year. And I mean, I guess that led to a growing population, and they were able to fill like the white collar jobs and like end up in white neighborhoods. But then if they don't speak English like consistently or fluently, it kind of like hindered them a little bit. So I think it's just interesting that like we like allowed them to come when we needed their help, not like when we really needed their help, like not even just like when we needed their labor.
Yeah.
And I think it's like how we talked about this in class today, but how again we try to be the good guys, and we we're their ally during World War II and everything, but we still like won't let them after how many years of not even letting them into our country and like using them to do our jobs and like kicking them out, we still like try to look like the good guys and use them as our allies. And I think that
everything is in our own best interest. Like we're gonna make this act look like it's not super terrible, because we do that nowadays too. We try to like sugarcoat the like racist policy by like making it like not look so racist, which is what they did with this. Like, oh, it's only me for 10 years, and then pushing it further and further for another 20 years.
They're just trying to benefit like as much as they can. They really didn't have a care for anybody else.
Well, it just shows how our country is based on racialization, and that's it. Kind of we can connect that to everything, every act that they try and put in place,
and how like when like what you're saying about the English is like we're so obsessed with assimilation as well, like. Especially, like, even if we let immigrants in, the expectation is that they will speak English and that they will have like American ideals, and like how she was talking about like the cultural differences, especially like how like the West tends to look at other cultures as like oppressive, and like we're the savior. So like if they're coming here, they better be like us.
I think that's a good segue into the second question
Yeah.
about what instances of racial profiling have larger implications and surface level consequences. Because one of the things we did bring up was the literacy test for United States citizenship.
Well, I just think like so the literacy tests were meant to, test people on how well they knew English and stuff. But it was like clearly people who are immigrating from a different country aren't going to be very good at speaking our language. And I mean, it's like, if we went to Mexico, we're not going to be good at speaking
and same with like
Spanish.
So pretty much sets them up to fail. So
Yeah.
they can't become a citizen.
And so that's why it was
Like it's like, oh, if you can't do English and like you can't do this literacy test, then you obviously aren't smart enough to be like
I
it's
think
just like basically racial.
that too also goes along with like they also have to take a test that like tests them on like the history and like the policies of the United States, and like their country might like they might not know that. Like how are they supposed to know that if it's like not their
there's a lot
own?
of stuff we don't even know.
I know.
Yeah,
So I
literally.
think if they even try to know, it's going to be hard because they're going to have to translate what we have in English to their own language, and not everything has a direct translation, so things can get fuzzy. And that test is not easy, especially like even like probably someone in high school who's a U.S. citizen doesn't know the answers to all of those.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about in class how she said we probably would all fail it.
Yeah.
And then like back to the literacy test, like it was obviously testing someone's ability to read and write, but they started doing these in the 1850s through the mid 1900s. And what I kind of find funny about that is a lot of Americans weren't literate in the 1800s and early 1900s.
It was
People didn't get educations.
It was
They-
to keep people out.
Yeah.
Because I think even at the time that these were a thing, especially back in when all these like bands that we talked about previously, American citizens normally would go maybe through like 5th or so grade, and then they would work on farms when they were old enough. Like they didn't even have, I don't think, the education level to pass these tests at the time that they were being administered either. The same way we couldn't pass the tests like you talked about that are about like our Constitution, our policies and history.
and it just proves the racial profiling that our country has always implemented to keep these people out.
I feel like you can move into like how like we have like the airports and like Homeland Security. Like after 9/11, everyone looked at people like from
Middle
East.
Middle
East, how was like everything was like stereotyped and everyone was terrified of like any people that looked resembled like Islamic or anything.
I'm sure that's too, or like I'm not sure like what countries you're talking about with the travel bans, but I'm sure there was
the
like
same countries.
there was like travel bans to there.
It's like Sudan, Iran.
It's like just because like a few
I don't
people
even
like
think,
came
I don't know
with
if it's
that.
still in
They
place.
stereotyped
I don't-
everyone how
It happened. It was 2017. Trump administration was an executive order. The travel bans were.
Yeah, and like with like, and that has like a lot of implications, like, cause then like, especially as like a Muslim too, like you see that where everyone is like just expects like, everyone thinks I'm oppressed all the time when I'm Muslim. They're like, oh, like are you allowed to do this and do that? And it's like the whole religion is seen as like oppressive because that's the image that's been like portrayed. And then like when we go to airports, like I always get patted down, and so does my family, and like so it's like it's something that affects us like all the time. And so it's like at a surface level, it's like, oh, like they're terrorists, but then like it actually affects like your daily life. Like we've had like so many threats, and like we've had to have like police at our mosque all the time because there's always like whenever we have big congregations, someone's like, we're gonna shoot you guys. So then it's like obviously a bit deeper.
Well, yeah. If you think about it, like 9/11 happened almost 19 years ago now.
Yeah. And it's not even like Muslim people too. It's like people who, it's like how we lump everyone together because we don't have education on like other cultures. So like a lot of people who were like harassed after 9/11 were actually like Sikh Indians because they wear a turban. And like a turban is associated with Muslim countries, but they're not Muslim.
Pretty much anyone who's from like Middle East people are just like you're a terrorist.
Yeah,
You're
and
going
even
to
then, it's like
try
a lot of Muslims aren't even
Yeah.
actually from the Middle East. They're all
Exactly.
the most, the biggest Muslim country is Indonesia.
Also, like with that, just and like Homeland Security, Homeland Security was disbanded in 2002, and then kind of just like had an impact because it like dismembered like the 22 federal agencies and it lost a lot of like federal employment jobs, but then it ended up creating things like ICE and Border Patrol and things like that that do affect our country daily right now.
I'm pretty sure we're running way over time,
Yeah, we
so
really
we
are. I was
should
like,
move on to the last thing, which we'll quickly touch on the third implication is the 13th Amendment, and we mentioned this in class when Khalid did his lecture about how mass incarceration of Black people after the 13th Amendment was passed. We still have the reparations of that today. Mass incarceration is still a humongous problem in the United States, especially of Black men.
Well, and for like really like pitiful crimes, they get like long sentences. It's like if that was a white like male, that would
And
not
that
be.
happens with like
that's
Mexican
completely
Americans too. Like again, I was like we like profile like Mexican Americans being dangerous, and that's why they can't immigrate here, and that goes into why we like ICE never targets like European immigrants. So that's like, the larger implication of like the narrative that we're told.
Yeah. Anyone else want to add something to that? All
Oh,
right.
we're like 21 minutes.
Wait, should we say our names?
Yeah, so
Oh, yeah.
I'm Rachel Steinhoff.
McKaylee Sides.
Zoha Kadir.
Roger Flum.
Emily Stratmon.
Oh, for